We have a huge amount of information to chat about and speculate on regarding this upcoming Dawn of Ragnarok DLC, which has all been located in the game files thanks to Peda, and at the time of uploading this video, there's been no official announcement as of yet by Ubisoft, which to be honest with you is incredibly bamboozling considering the amount of stuff that they've actually uploaded to the Valhalla client. But with that being said, all of this stuff is very much subject to change and of course spoiler heavy, so just be aware of that and let's have a chinwag about some cool stuff. So let's start with the DLC title. It's been named as the Dawn of Ragnarok in the game files, and it seems to all kick off in Ravensthorpe, where Eivor experiences a dream and goes on to say that Svartalfheim invaded, Baldur held captive, and the goddess Frigg murdered. What do these dreaded visions signify? And this quest art is actually called The Restless Dream, where Eivor will need to find a way to actually return to Svartalfheim in this dream to explore these visions in more depth. And to actually do that, Valkyrie tells Eivor that he or she, depending upon who you play as, will need to truly surrender to previous trauma and fears, and only in that state can Eivor actually continue this godly dream. Now this lines up really nicely with a similar experience Sigurd underwent at the hands of Folke in the story. So could Eivor lose an eye here or perhaps relive the murder of her parents? It is definitely food for thought, and I would expect something similar here. Now when we do actually enter Svartalfheim, it states that a power level of 340 is recommended to play as, with the option to boost your character up to that level if you're just starting Valhalla as a whole, as well as also providing you with gear and abilities appropriate to that level. Now this action actually seems to be irreversible, by the way, so as soon as you boost to 340 and then leave the dream world or Svartalfheim, you then won't be able to return to England to what level you were before the actual boost, if that kind of makes sense. But boost aside, I've just had a quick thought which I think would be good to actually mention early in the video in terms of a release date. Well, we don't actually have one at the time of uploading this video, although I do suspect it's going to be released around March 2022, but I'll of course let you know when we actually hear something concrete from Ubisoft. Anyway, so we've managed to actually make it to Svartalfheim thanks to Valkyrie, but what is the actual reason in doing so apart from exploring this dream Eivor's had in more detail? Well, Peda has actually found the actual codex entry of Svartalfheim, what an absolute wizard, and it does go on to say that, led by Surtur and bolstered by Jotnar allies, the Muspels have conquered Svartalfheim. For unknown reasons, Surtur has kidnapped Havi's son, Baldur, suggesting that the conquest of Svartalfheim is part of a grander, more sinister plan. And so, Havi has arrived in Svartalfheim to rescue his beloved son. So there we go, that's a short but sweet synopsis of what this DLC seems to be all about. And Peda's actually found a few interesting characters noted in the game files. We've got Baldur for one, he's son of Odin, and his mother Frigg or Freya seems to have actually been murdered here in this DLC. We also have Surtur, who's a fire giant and ruler of Muspelheim. He looks like he's going to be our big boy antagonist here in this DLC, and in Norse mythology was destined to lead the fire giants into Ragnarok with his flaming sword, which we actually already have in game, by the way. And Peda's also found reference to Fafnir and Glod, which are noted in the game files. Fafnir actually became a dragon and was slayed by Sigurd, and coincidentally we also have a model of a dragon also found by Peda in the game files. And Glod, on the other hand, is actually a fire giant and is noted as transforming into a creature who gnaws as a frontal attack, which is quite animalistic indeed. So on that basis, I genuinely think that we may be seeing some dragons in some sort of capacity here in this DLC. Now let's talk about some achievements, and these were initially reported by Jonathan, which if you do speak French, by the way, it's definitely worth checking out his video. I'll pop the link down below. However, Peda has also found all 10 of these achievements as well, and I'm actually going to put them all up on your screen right now, just in case you haven't seen them, or you do want to take a screenshot and then just check it out in detail later. However, I do want to bring your attention to the See No Evil achievement, where we need to assassinate 2 enemies and then fly away without actually being detected. And that's actually in reference to Odin abilities, where you can use your bow to teleport to an enemy or location and then actually kill the NPC, which does actually sound very similar to the Shadow of Mordor mechanic. And then of course we get to transform into Odin's Raven form and fly away. And I'm actually going to go through all of these new Odin abilities in this video, by the way, but I just wanted to kind of flag that just in case you saw it on screen and had a bit of a WTF moment. And speaking of WTF moments, there's also another one here noted as the Expert Storyteller, where you need to tell Kara a story with 4 boasts, and that also doesn't really actually make too much sense on the surface level. But this is actually how you obtain the Odin All-Father Armor Set, which is located at the Valkyrie Fight Arena, which is where Kara is, and that actually brings us really nicely onto that topic now. So this Valkyrie Fight Arena, what is it all about? Well, once again, Peda has found the full codex entry, and I'm also going to pop this back up on your screen in full so you can browse or take a screenshot in your own time, as it is quite long. But to briefly paraphrase, the Valkyrie Arena is managed by a Valkyrie called Kara, whom Harvey will actually be telling stories to, and these stories are then replayed out in this arena where Harvey will will fight regular, elite, and boss type enemies. And these encounters also do give us the option to increase the difficulty, which we can do by boasting to Kara of how much of a legendary Aesir god we are. Now these boasts or heroic tales do seem to be collectibles scattered around Svartalfheim, by the way, similar to flying papers, I'm assuming. So depending upon your performance, Kara is going to award you with these Valorite tokens, which you can then spend at her Valkyrie shop. And interestingly, this arena mechanic also seems to involve Reda, who's going to give us some sort of Reda tale, which in turn we will then tell Kara, who's going to then put on an arena challenge based on that story for us to then complete. Now that's my interpretation anyway. It could be completely wrong, but it does look like Reda dailies will be occurring at this Valkyrie arena. And a little bit of a side note here, Reda is obviously going to be appearing in this DLC, and I think he's been overlooked for too long. I think there's something up with this guy, and I really do hope that we find out more about him in this DLC. Now, something you may or may not be happy about is river raids, and they seem to be making some sort of reappearance here in this Ragnarok DLC, but instead of foreign supplies contributing to the construction of Ravensthorpe, we seem to be extracting silica from silica machines that are dotted all around Svartalfheim. In fact, it seems that these silica machines are called milners, which are actually used to process silica by the dwarves before the Muspel and Jotun occupation, and are recognised on your map as these kind of water wheel icons. Now these milners, and I'm sure I've pronounced that incorrectly, but in Old Norse it is a word that actually means mill, which also seems to make a lot of sense here and add up. However, we don't have any river raids kind of named per se so far, so Peda tells me, but I wouldn't put it past Ubisoft to include some other realms as kind of potential raiding maps going forward, such as Muspelheim or Jotunheim. I think that would make a lot of sense to me and match up with what we've actually got going on in the main game anyway. Now after we do obtain all of this silica, we seem to be able to put it to good use at a dwarven blacksmith underground in a dwarven shelter to actually upgrade Odin's bracer. And if you haven't actually heard of Odin's bracer before now, then no problem, I'm going to break it all down for you in a second. But before I do, if you have actually learned anything new or felt like you've picked up any value at all from the video so far, then if you wouldn't mind, a very swift like down below really genuinely helps me out, so thank you very much. Now this Odin's bracer, or actually it's called the Hugr-Rip now, so Peda tells me in the game files, and I actually suspect that this is going to be playing a large prominent role in this DLC, as this is the device which has been bestowed on Harvey by the dwarves, and with it Harvey will actually be able to acquire powers from certain enemies which he can then use against them to perform impossible feats. Now these impossible feats are actually Odin abilities or Odin powers, which I'm going to take you through next, but the only way that we can actually activate these powers isn't just by actually owning the Hugr-Rip bracer, but rather actually having enough Hugr or spirit energy that we've actually absorbed from fallen enemies to then be able to use it. And I like to think of this mechanic like a mana bar, where we need to consistently refill it by doing certain tasks to then actually be able to use the special abilities it's capable of. And I also think it's quite similar, just from what we're going on right now, to the ultimate ability in the most recent Far Cry game. But as we just briefly spoke about, we can upgrade this bracer at the Dwarven Blacksmith if we do have enough silica, and this is going to allow us to actually open up 2 memory slots on the bracer itself and commit 2 spells to the bracer instead of the standard 1. And I think this is a pretty similar mechanic to when you actually upgrade an armor piece and then more rune slots become available for socketing. But I've got to say, in my opinion, that I think the most interesting mechanic around this Hugr-Rip Odin's bracer is what is called All-Father Incarnate, and it states that we'll be able to choose one of 4 upgrades which actually best suits your playstyle when we've got this bracer equipped. Now of course Peda has found all 4 of these playstyles, and I'm going to pop them on your screen right now so you can have a look at your own leisure. But to be honest with you, I really do like the idea of this, and I'm all for customization when it comes to playstyle, as long as it does make a genuine impact in game. So hopefully these do make a good splash, and it's a big fingers crossed from me on that front. So we've gone ahead and we've got our Odin's bracer. We've then upgraded it using the silica, and I've actually gathered Hugr or mana by killing certain enemies. So now we can actually go ahead and use some of these Odin powers and abilities. And first on our list is the Muspel Glamour and the Jotun Glamour abilities, which make you invisible to fire and ice giants for 10 seconds respectively. And I essentially think that this is a Frankish travel cloak, but for Svartalfheim, and let's actually hope that this one works this time. Now we also have the Raven form ability here, which allows you to fly around as Odin in Raven form, look at a desired spot on the ground, and then suddenly appear there. And you can also air assassinate with this particular ability, which I'm not going to lie to you, does sound like good fun. Now additionally, Peda has found the Teleport Infusion spell, which allows you to teleport, dodge, or roll around for 15 seconds, and you can also teleport to certain locations using your bow. And and I'm thinking this is going to be very similar to what Odin does in that boss fight against Eivor in the storyline, and of course like the Shadow of Mordor example that we mentioned earlier. And even more interestingly, there's an Odin power here called Offensive Resurrect, where you ignite your weapon for 30 seconds, and then every enemy you subsequently kill with said weapon, Odin then resurrects them to fight alongside you. Now this doesn't seem to work on bosses, unfortunately, and I can actually see this being pretty ridiculous if you actually get this timed correctly in some sort of AoE kill streak, in a good and bad way, by the way. I'm very much looking forward to seeing some videos from the community with this particular ability. I do wonder if it's got some sort of cap, but we're just going to have to wait and see. Now let's move on to some armor sets, and from what Peda has found so far, it looks like we're going to be picking up 6 here in this Ragnarok DLC, and obviously that is very subject to change, folks, so do not take that as gospel. But let's have a look at this Jotnar armor set, which will increase your armor when you use an ability, and can actually be obtained by defeating Angraboda's wolves, which are elite roaming bosses, and I'm going to be talking about these very shortly. Secondly, we have the Fire Giant set, which increases your melee damage when your weapon is on fire, and this armor set is going to be seemingly looted throughout Svartalfheim. Thirdly, we have the Dwarven Blacksmith set, which increases your armor when stunning an enemy, and increases your speed just generally, and this can also be found unlooted around Svartalfheim, it seems. And fourthly, we have the Odin All-Father Armor Set, which increases your assassination damage when undetected and cloaked. In fact, we can actually obtain this at Kara's arena, the Valkyrie we spoke about earlier. A big thanks to Ibsarp for working his magic with Peda to find the models here, because this is the visual look of what is believed to be the Odin armor set. And it may look familiar, as it seems to be a reskin of the Twilight armor set that your Raptor covered recently. And instead of me just repeating all of that here, do go check it out. It is a good video. However, that Twilight set is noted as being a pre-order bonus which Peda found. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Twilight armor set is actually a reskin of the Odin armor set you can see here, and not the other way around, if that kind of makes sense. I really hope we're not picking up reskins as a pre-order bonus, but we're just going to have to wait and see. I'm sure we'll find out soon. Now the final 2 armor sets, we've got the Hreidmar's Cursed armor set here, which is going to kill us if we actually wear it. That is until we actually purify it with purifying runes that we can loot across Svartalfheim, and as soon as we pick up these runes and socket them in the armor set, Hreidmar's Cursed armor set then becomes Hreidmar's Blessed armor set, and that's going to heal us every time we crit with our weapons and do damage to everybody in the vicinity when we do decide to heal with a ration. Now I don't think I'm going to be running with this set personally, but it's still a pretty cool mechanic and I appreciate the creativity. Now let's move on to some weapons, because it seems that we're going to be picking up 10 here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and put them all on your screen again instead of going through each one and making this video way longer than it needs to be. With that being said though, I do want to bring your attention to this hammer, because I think it's really great to see, mainly because we actually haven't seen any hammers released in any sort of format in such a long time. It's called the Ivaldi's Battle Hammer, and I've actually got my fingers crossed for some awesome looking dwarven hammer here. Please give me some Lord of the Rings vibes. Now Peda has also found the Atiga weapon, which is what you can kind of see here on your screen. It looks like a halberd, so potentially a new weapon class here as well. Additionally, it seems that we may be picking up more rewards for weapons and armor sets from these mythical hordes, as Peda has actually found reference to these hordes being a reward to players who have actually achieved significant progress in the main game and have actively engaged with Valhalla since its release. Now there's 4 of these mythical hordes named, and they seem to only be accessible in Svartalfheim, and I'm very interested to see what we actually get from them. I hope it's not just tattoos, but yeah, as with everything, we're just gonna have to wait and see again here. Now let's move on and talk about the map, and Peda has rustled up a brief outline of the Svartalfheim map, and I'm going to go ahead and pop it next to England and the Siege of Paris map just for comparison. Saying that though, it really is impossible to tell the scope of this map just based on those 3 pictures alone, but there we are. Interestingly though, with this Svartalfheim map, there is 3 locations named, which I'm actually not going to try and embarrass myself any further and pronounce right now, but they do seem to actually hold several smeders, otherwise known as blacksmith forges or anvils, I believe they're called, and they actually seem to have a purpose here. Now they're actually called myth memories, and they will seemingly allow us to understand the greatest dwarven masterpieces that were made. It says that we're going to have to interact with them to learn more, so I'm thinking a potential discovery tour mechanic here, and to be fair, that does make sense, as we already have Mjolnir and Gungear smiders, which are weapons that we actually already own in game anyway. Now these anvils and smeders or smiders aside, while we're off gallivanting around Svartalfheim, we'll come across new roaming bosses. Now the first one's called Angrabotha's Wolfpack, and there's actually 5 of these elite units, and they're all laying low across Svartalfheim, and we actually need to rescue dwarves in the world, who are then going to provide us with intelligence on their precise location. And when we do find them and kill them, we'll end up picking up each piece of armor set of the Jotun armor set, which we discussed briefly. Additionally, we've also got Sinmara's champion, Sinmara being the consort of Sutta, king of the Muspels and Muspelheim, and they're actually out roaming roaming the world trying to proactively hunt us down. It also seems that they can actually arrive via Muspel alarms when we are raiding those Muspel and Jotun camps, and I do think this is probably going to be the closest thing that we're going to get to a mercenary system or zealot system. That's my interpretation of that anyway. We're just going to have to wait and see as usual. Now, if you have watched this far, then good work, because that was a lot of information, and to be honest with you, even though I'm not a massive fan when it comes to the fantasy and mythology kind of stuff, I do think that this could be a good laugh. Saying that though, I will be popping out more videos like this to keep you updated on Valhalla, so if you do want to see more stuff like this and be the first to know what's coming in this game, do consider hitting the notification bell so you can find your way back to the channel easily. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Peda. These type of videos just would not be possible to make without him, and it gives us all of this great information to talk about and speculate on. So thanks again, mate, and Ibsop for his work behind the scenes on the armor set and weapons. And if you haven't already, do swing by and join our Discord. We've got over 700 awesome people here, and it would be fantastic to see you in the lobby. And I think that's going to do it for me on this one, folks. I really do hope you enjoyed the video, and as usual, coffee's on me.